Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. Thank you so much for joining us. And today we have a really special session on nutrition planned for all of you. And our guest for today is Ishi Khosla. Ishi Khosla is a practicing clinical nutritionist, columnist, author, entrepreneur, and researcher. She is actively involved in clinical practice at the Center for Dietary Counseling in Delhi, where she deals with a wide range of nutrition related health problems, including obesity, diabetes, and others. She has founded a nutrition app which has helped many people all around the world lose weight scientifically, but also understand the art and science behind eating well. She has also spearheaded a health food company called Whole Foods, which produces and retails health foods. She has authored several books on nutrition, including Eating at Work, The Diet Doctor, Is Wheat Killing You, and The Cholesterol Facts. So we're very fortunate to have Ms. Khosla join us today. So welcome, ma'am. Welcome to our session today.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So we wanted to start off by, speaking to you about families and how they eat, and also about the timing of meals. So to start off with, the new year is just starting out, and many families, I think, take a resolution around this time to eat healthy. And however, a lot of us struggle to actually, keep up the resolution. So, do you have any tips of how we can set, achievable goals towards good nutrition and health?
Yes, Vani, I think we all have been striving to achieve nutritional adequacy and balance and optimum lifestyles where we do the right things. And I would say mostly people fail. But when I say that, I would probably correct myself and say that it's not the people who fail. It's there is a flaw inherently. It's not your fault. We all start blaming ourselves. Say for instance, I said I'm going to go off sugar, or I'm going to go off, say, have a keto diet, or I'm going to do this. And well, the reason why this doesn't work is it's too drastic and it's not sustainable. That's number one, when you go on extremes. So let's always understand that the targets and the goals should be realistic. They shouldn't be which some things which you will not be able to do long term. There is another problem here, and that is sometimes people who are sensitive to certain foods, and when they continue to consume those foods, they don't realize that that is keeping them away from their fitness schedules. For instance, if I say wheat has been found to be there are many aspects of wheat, which include gluten, which include the starches, etc., and the glycemic index as is the carbohydrates. But it is different from, say, rice, which is also a grain and carbohydrate. So wheat has something called gluteomorphine, and that has an addictive component. So when you are removing something and then adding it back, or continuing to have it in small quantities, it will keep you away from your goals because it is not allowing you to regulate your appetite. So there are, what I'm trying to say is, addictive components in our food systems, which inadvertently we are eating and not realizing they're damaging us and keeping us away from the goals which we have set out for ourselves, and also make you feel like failures by the end of it, which becomes a cycle. You start and you do well and you feel great, and you take a little bit of the food which is addictive or a trigger food for you, and it sets you back, and then you say, oh my God, I am so foolish, I'm so indisciplined, and I am, or I didn't exercise enough, and I'm again. So we begin to get into that cycle. So resistance to goals, when you're not achieving your goals, I would say resistant to your results, is where you suspect a food sensitivity, and therefore removal of those trigger foods and the addictive foods which you unknowingly are consuming. And lastly, I would say it could also be social compulsions, which could mean sometimes even professional compulsions and occupational issues, which keep you away from doing exactly what you would like to do. And very often, I have people who are doing, particularly in the lockdown, that was a clear example where they were able to follow the diet to 100% and felt, they were like transformed. And, some of my patients in the lockdown did 10 kgs in a month. And, it really, and this is not one, there were several of them. And it just goes to show that when these compulsions are not there, you're able to stick. So the art is also in weaving whatever your nutritional advice and lifestyle changes are within your lifestyle as well. And particularly, what goes wrong is timing. You're not able to stick to a particular time of meals, and then you overeat and you binge eat, or you sometimes just don't have time in the morning and you eat all the food that you are trying to eat in the evening or later part of the day, which works differently. So in a certain way, we need, it's not like I'm saying that these compulsions should be excuses. We can all find answers and solutions, but then it needs a little bit of more focus and planning. So I personally would just like to say, mostly I find it's not your fault. And we also, I would add another fourth point to this answer is conflicting information, contradictory information. There is, with the pandemic, I add is an infodemic, too much information. And the universities that we have online, Google topping the charts, is something which is also contributing to this. What should I do? What is right? What is wrong? And then, you look at a YouTube video and you say, oh, I'm going to do a detox and I'm going to do, whatever, get inspired from somewhere. And then, it may not be for you. So that is one more issue.
That's very interesting, ma'am. I like how, especially, you talk about how we're so quick to blame ourselves and then we just give up instead of, setting maybe more achievable targets.
Yes.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it. So, ma'am, you mentioned in your work, you mentioned a lot about, food timings and the importance of having an early dinner. So, I wanted to, understand a little bit more about that.
To be honest, as a practitioner of modern nutrition science, we dismissed this whole concept. And we literally said a calorie is a calorie in the morning and a calorie in the evening. It doesn't change. And I think with the progressive inputs from the Ayurvedic world and the traditional wisdom, today we are also scientifically able to validate the importance of timing. The body has what we call a circadian rhythm, which is the body clock which is set for all creatures, and it is in sync with the day and night cycles that we have. And so we are not only designed to function in a certain way, we also, when we break it, we fall prey to issues which we don't realize are linked to timing. I'll give you a simple example of, say, a digestive problem, say hyperacidity or reflux. Several people complain of acidity at night and waking up with, terrible reflux and heartburn, and they need to pop in pills, or, they even sometimes need to puke. And if the same individual eats the same food by about 6:37, that problem just vanishes. So there is something to say that if you're eating late, your digestive fire, your digestive capacity is compromised. And whether it is a digestive problem, it is just a manifestation. Simple, another example will be weight. People who were a certain weight eating during the day, when they get into a night shift and they have to reverse that, in a year, we can see an average weight gain of 10 to 12 kgs. We see the same food. We see far more increased risk of diabetes and metabolic syndrome and belly fat and hypertension, etc., etc., etc. So something is to be said that it's not about just what you eat; it's also when you eat it. And there is enough evidence now in science that certain hormones are secreted at certain times in the body. Every organ has a clock. It's also called what we call chrononutrition, according to the clock. And there is a peak performance of every organ, and it all works like an orchestra in the body. So we need to respect timing. We need to respect the rhythm, your own body clock also. Sometimes there are people, so basically it comes down to one size does not fit all. So if I am not hungry for breakfast, let me not load up on breakfast because some science suggested that we should. So if I'm hungry at 12, let me eat at 12, and I'm hungry next at 5 or 6, let me respect that. So your own body clock also has to be respected. And but there is no violation when it comes to eating late. There is no room for that. If you say, oh, I feel hungry only about 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, that's not an option. That means you're somewhere, there is something disturbed.
Hmm. Right. And ma'am, what would be an ideal gap between, say, dinner and going to bed?
Ideally 4 hours.
Right. Right. So,
But even
what
3 hours
time?
is all right. Even 3 hours is all right. But a
Right.
lot of people therefore misuse this advice and say, oh, I ate my dinner at 9 or 10 and then I slept only at 2. It's again going against the organ clock.
Right.
And remember that sleep is the only time when the body is servicing itself. And what do you do when you say service? It is cleaning up. It is also called detoxifying. It is also healing. So if you don't allow that time, those good hours, and you start eating at that time, you will be messed up.
Right. And ma'am, what time would you suggest? What is the time that one should have dinner, and in a ideal time for dinner?
Go by the sun. Go by the sun. The way it functions. Peak at 12 and goes down by about 6:37. So eat most of your food by then. I'm not saying
Right.
eat nothing after 7, but if you can help it and you're trying to follow a good regime, you're trying to cut down belly fat to achieve your goals, particularly like you began with the new year resolutions to eat right and to eat optimally, certainly 7, 7:30 would be the last. And maybe something, if you get hungry, if you're up, you can take a light, very, very light snack.
Right. And ma'am, I want to ask you, for some certain families, they're working late. You mentioned night shifts. So it's a little difficult to eat early. So what do you do in a situation like that?
You have to reset your cycle. You have to reset your food cycle. You have to put in food in the early hours. And if you are up at night, then don't sort of eat heavy or eat solid meals at that time. Certainly not. I mean, as an exception, it can be an odd, exception for a few days. It's fine. But if you are trying to eat optimally, there is no way that one can. So there are ways of just eating. If you're up at night, you are certainly going to be having, say, some part of the morning to yourself. So it's about 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, you'll be sleeping in the early hours. And so I do that with my patients very successfully. So they eat between 2 and 8 or something like that, or 2 and 7:30, and that's fine. And to your question regarding families, families need to reset this time. And unfortunately, the social angle, when I talked about social compulsions, the socializing time in India particularly is like 8:39, and that's where all wisdom falls apart, and you're unable to stick to this. So I would say let that be. So two things there: A, don't eat heavy at that time. Eat frugally, and B, so you can also eat most of your food and go, so that you don't get tempted. So a lot of people say, what do we do with it? So you eat and go and eat frugally. That's one. And the other is, as in once a week, you can let yourself off and eat a late meal, and try and then do a balancing the next day. So maybe you can give up on a meal or have just a kind of a detox meal, so that the effects of that indulgence are neutralized.
Right, those are very helpful tips. Ma'am, also when we're speaking about families with children, I've heard a lot of families, they push their dinner time because it's children's study time, 7 to 8 is when they're studying, and then they end up having dinner late. And, the cycle is further, just goes later and later. So, with children, how do you manage this?
So, all the more reason for children, it's important to set the right habits. So, I think that's really not a compromise area. But yeah, it's a very real situation where children are going through tuitions and hours of tuition. So, I would say that let lunch be their main meal and an evening time be their main meals. And after that, it could all be frugal. It could be just easy to digest food. They could do with a protein and a vegetable, soups and steamed vegetables, and maybe sometimes a smoothie of fruit and milk or something like that, which doesn't strain their digestion late at night. So they have to find some sweet spot during the evenings or during the day to eat most of their food. So clearly, a lighter meal at night would be a solution.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that
That's
happens, it's the opposite. Most people then, after their studies, want to eat their comfort meal, etc. But it's really not ideal. And it also increases insulin levels at night. And these kids today are suffering from several metabolic problems. So I wouldn't keep them as a protected group anymore. They are as vulnerable as adults.
So yes, ma'am, it has been such a wonderful, it's an absolute pleasure talking to you, and thank you so much for giving us your time. Really appreciate it. And to everyone watching, thank you for joining our session. We have these sessions every Friday with an expert, so please do tune in next week as well. Thank you.
Bye-bye.